Why did you think you could use this hotel? Your name isn't even on the reservation. An old geezer like you would be better suited to the old motel next door. Just use that." I was thrown these words by my boss, who is over a decade younger than me. At first, I couldn't comprehend what he was talking about. But knowing him, these words didn't feel out of place. However, it was only when things started to get worse that I truly felt the weight of those words. My name is George Smith. This year, I turned 52. I've been working at my current company for about 30 years. It's a consulting firm for small and medium-sized enterprises, and I am just an ordinary employee. I didn't join with any grand ambitions. I simply liked the work of supporting people and companies and felt it suited my nature. I live with just my wife and have led a life unconnected to promotions. As for me, I find happiness in a situation where my wife can do what she wants, how she wants. The company I work for isn't a large corporation. It falls under the category of small to medium-sized enterprises. We have just over 40 employees, creating a rather homely atmosphere. In my department, including myself, we are a team of 6, managing operations in a small group. The head of our department is a calm individual, just a year older than me, and we often engage in various discussions. The other members, although younger than me, interact with me warmly, much like a beloved uncle in the family. I genuinely think it's a comfortable environment, but such tranquil times are often disrupted by trivial incidents. One day, as usual, I arrived at work to find an unfamiliar young man sprawled in the seat of our department head. The previous head, who had been there until yesterday, was nowhere to be seen. For the time being, I decided to sit at my usual desk, but it seemed like the other members were also unaware of the situation, feeling somewhat restless. When the morning meeting started, the young man at the head's desk moved next to Mr. Johnson, the company president, and was introduced. His name is Michael Green. At 40, he is a decade younger than me. His suit seemed rather high-end, just from its appearance. When Michael was introduced by Mr. Johnson, he stepped forward, surveyed the room, and spoke briefly. "I am here to reform this company. I've come to seek newness and create a better role model. We will revamp anything outdated, so I look forward to working with all of you." It appeared that the previous head had been transferred to another department. It was a sudden personnel change, and we hadn't even had the chance to say goodbye. Being a small company, I thought there would be another opportunity to talk. However, I soon realized how wrong I was, just an hour after Michael's introduction. From the very first meeting, Michael began to criticize the existing methods and practices of our department. "Why are these documents printed on paper? Wouldn't electronic communication be more cost-effective and easier for information sharing? Is all contract communication done on paper? It's feasible to carry documents for local enterprises, but what about distant ones? Apply for electronic signatures and make them official for the company. A consulting firm that cannot utilize IT tools is bound to be left behind. I'll be leading the training, so please attend." It was unbearable to have everything we had worked on changed by someone who had just arrived. I decided to voice my opinion. "I appreciate your input, Michael, but most of the companies we've contracted with are based on the scale of company and informational assets. Focusing on human resource and sales material, changing everything on our end could significantly affect our clients." "That's the problem with old-timers," Michael muttered loud enough for others to hear. I felt slightly irritated. However, Michael, standing before me, seemed oblivious to such nuances in people's emotions. Unfazed, he repeated my statement. "Are you Mr. Smith? What factors are essential for branding our consulting business?" "Can't answer. That's lamentable. Listen, consulting is a business that shapes the future of companies. How can you consult without being aware of what many companies are currently adopting? Sticking to old ways will leave you behind. Change your mindset. Adapt to the times. Turn your everyday routine into something extraordinary." Hearing him, it seemed like he wanted to say that his words should be our top priority from now on. A different type of personnel than we've ever had, but it was a mystery why Mr. Johnson hired Michael as a mid-career recruit with a position. Mr. Johnson often says that building a company is all about recruiting and nurturing talent, which is essential for the company's success. However, this personnel decision seems to contradict his words a bit. It might be that Mr. Johnson's attitude when he's watching is different from the one he shows to employees like us. No, I'm certain it is different. Ever since Michael announced his plans for reform at the meeting, every day has been a torment for me. The company not only made significant changes to our previous operations, but also organized a so-called training session outside of working hours, which turned out to be a showcase of self-praise. Furthermore, it's now up to each sales representative to communicate these changes in contracts and data to our clients. Michael would nonsensically ask, why does he have to be the one to tell them? It should be us who haven't kept up with the times to do this. Michael frequently uses terms like outdated and old-fashioned. It seems he considers himself at the forefront of innovation. Naturally, he wouldn't leave older employees or those nearing retirement untouched. I don't consider myself overly prideful. But even I have things I've cultivated over time, like relationships with our clients. Yet, Michael even attempts to negate these. Mr. Smith, your methods are inefficient. We need to shift to a more cost-effective and high-return approach. Specifically, change your sales methods like this. What he suggested was the complete opposite of everything I had worked on. I explained the background and the company's long-standing practices, but Michael, now the head, simply scoffed and refused to listen to me. His behavior didn't stop there. It became increasingly harassment-like. He made us record our sales calls and tele-appointments and submit them. Later, he'd call me in and lecture me for hours on what was wrong with my sales approach. Many employees, drained of the will to resist, accepted this ordeal in silence, hoping it would end if they didn't object. Initially, I thought of adopting the same approach but found it impossible to accept. That must have unamused Michael. His attitude towards me worsened day by day. When calling me, he would shout, "Hey," and I heard he was referring to me as that old fossil, that nuisance, behind my back. Whenever Michael entertained company visitors, he invariably assigned me to do miscellaneous matters. He would then mock me, pointing out, "You see, there are roles in work, and when you get old, this is what suits you best." The visitors could only offer awkward smiles and didn't continue the conversation, but Michael seemed thoroughly pleased with himself. I couldn't understand why he was so intent on attacking those older than him. Amidst all this, I was drowning in daily stress, but I still had my wife. I thought as long as she and I could maintain a decent life, I could get through this. That was when it happened. The company decided to organize an employee trip for bonding purposes. We were going to a fairly well-known hot spring town by bus. The hotel seemed more suited to younger people, but it also had open-air baths and cuisine that our age group would appreciate. I was excited to relax for a change. I told my wife I was leaving and set off for the meeting place at the station. It was only a few hundred meters away, a nice bit of exercise. My carry-on bag wasn't heavy, so it wasn't too tiring. The weather was clear and refreshing. I arrived at the meeting place. I was about 30 minutes early. Looking around, I saw no other employees, so I decided to enter a nearby cafe. The cafe was air-conditioned and comfortable. I ordered an iced coffee and enjoyed it at my table. A good day off. I hoped the employee trip would turn out well. But 5 minutes before the meeting time, not a single person had shown up. Thinking something was wrong, I called several colleagues. However, no one answered my calls. Eventually, I decided to call Michael. I really didn't want to, but I felt that not calling him in such a situation would lead to more trouble later. After several rings, I heard my superior's voice, tinged with laughter. "You're late. We've already left. You should catch up using a bus or taxi." With that, he hung up. I checked the email I had received. The time and meeting place were correct. The sender was Michael. I couldn't tell if he had intentionally sent me the wrong information. Despite my previous excitement, I decided to go to the hotel by connecting buses, not wanting to let the other employees down. I arrived at the hotel. It took about 3 hours. If I had taken the bus, it would have been just 40 or 50 minutes. Entering the hotel's entrance, I saw Michael standing there, an insidious smile on his face. He pointed at my bag and blurted out, "Why did you think you could use this hotel? Your name isn't even on the reservation. A geezer like you belongs in the rundown inn next door. Go use that." What is he talking about? Before I could process his words, Michael snatched my luggage and left it outside the entrance, pointing to the inn next door. "Come on, get moving." This was nothing short of bullying. I never expected to be treated like this, especially by someone younger. I was stunned, but exhaustion from the bus ride sapped my will to retaliate, so I moved to the adjacent inn without protest. Michael's laughter echoed behind me. At the inn, the landlady personally attended to me. She kindly carried my luggage and showed me around the inn. Despite its slightly worn appearance, the interior was well maintained and comfortable. Upon reaching my room, the landlady said, "Please relax," and left. Eager to wash off the sweat, I headed to the large public bath. It was quaint, a bit old-fashioned, but to my liking. The inn featured a sauna and an open-air bath, satisfying the basic elements of a hot spring. Returning to my room, I found dinner served by the waitress. The meal, using local produce, included warm dishes and a small, thick steak, all very satisfying. While enjoying my meal, the landlady came to check on me. I shared my appreciation, and she smiled, thanking me. Feeling somewhat better, I decided to share my day's experience with her. I avoided mentioning the hotel reservation but talked about the bus. The landlady listened sympathetically, without any criticism, showing concern for me. Feeling somewhat uplifted, I decided to share some stories about my everyday life. Talking about living with my wife and how she always has the upper hand, the landlady laughed a bit louder than before. "Mr. Smith, you say you're henpecked, but you speak so kindly. You must cherish your wife a lot. I'm sure she wishes for you to be more proactive," she remarked. After more pleasant conversation, she left the room. I then went for a walk outside, thinking it would be a good post-dinner exercise. The night breeze felt pleasant. It was quiet with few people around, creating a serene atmosphere. I came across a park and decided to sit on a bench there. While sitting, I reflected on recent events and the conversation I had with the landlady earlier. Suddenly, I sensed someone's presence and turned around to find Mr. Johnson, the company president, behind me. Mr. Johnson, noticing me, approached with his carry-on luggage. Originally, he was on a business trip and planned to join us afterward. Mr. Johnson and I sat on the bench and had a long, relaxed conversation. We reminisced fondly as our conversation flowed naturally. Mr. Johnson had a habit of going to a secluded park to think whenever he faced troubles. I had a similar habit, and once we had coincidentally met in the same park. Back then, I casually listened to his worries and made an offhand comment. It was something I said without much thought, but it turned out to be a word of salvation for Mr. Johnson, helping him resolve his dilemma. There was this new employee who had approached a client company for a business deal but had done so without sufficient sales preparation. Apparently, he used some inappropriate language during the visit, which upset the person in charge at the client's end. I wondered why a new employee was sent alone on such an important task. The client, a significant corporation, even considered terminating their contract with us, a concern that reached Mr. Johnson. Though Mr. Johnson was guiding the internal team and strategizing for the future, he hadn't found a satisfactory solution. Around that time, I was dealing with my own issues and often went for night walks. It usually lasts about 30 minutes, so my wife wasn't overly worried. One evening, while sitting on a bench in a nearby park, I recognized a familiar face on the next bench. It was Mr. Johnson. We were both surprised to meet each other unexpectedly, as we lived nearby but were unaware of it. Our expressions conveyed mutual understanding of each other's troubles. When I initiated the conversation with Mr. Johnson, he shared the problem about the new employee. I voiced my thoughts, though I can't recall exactly what I said. But it resonated with Mr. Johnson, and fortunately, the situation improved afterward. This shared habit and past experience remained a secret between us, never discussed with anyone else. It had been a while since Mr. Johnson and I had time to talk, so this encounter was a pleasant surprise. As the night deepened, Mr. Johnson prepared to head back to the hotel. Noticing me walking in a different direction, he called out that I am going the wrong way. But I informed him that I was staying at a different hotel. Upon hearing my story, Mr. Johnson became furious, questioning why such a thing happened and what Michael was thinking. He immediately called Michael, demanding he come to us right away. When a pale-faced Michael arrived, Mr. Johnson reprimanded him sternly. He continued, expressing that the company's achievements that Michael had praised during his interview were all thanks to me, and it was unacceptable to treat someone like me with such disregard. After sending Michael home, Mr. Johnson offered to have me stay at the original hotel. However, I chose to return to the inn, where the landlady and staff had treated me well. Mr. Johnson smiled at my decision, saying it was typical of me, and headed to the hotel. After the trip, Michael was demoted. To reforge his character, he was sent to work at a partner company known for its strict management, where he was subjected to a dormitory life and strict discipline from the matron. Though it was sad to imagine a grown man being disciplined, I couldn't help but feel it was necessary. Later, Mr. Johnson appointed me as the leader of a new project. Although I have been content with a supporting role, I accepted the leadership position, inspired by Mr. Johnson and the landlady's words. The project turned out to be a great success. Enjoying the experience of leading, I became open to more challenges. My wife noticed the change in me, complimenting my happier demeanor. We even visited the inn together, where the landlady welcomed us warmly, much to my wife's delight. With both my work and personal life flourishing, I resolved to continue striving for happiness.